Not all paths are straight. Some twist deep into the unknown. Hey, I'm Amanda Joy, and every Thursday, a new episode of Down the Crooked Path beckons. Paranormal stories, strange encounters, and folklore that lingers long after dark. So take a deep breath, grab your flashlight, or let the mysteries guide your steps. Down the Crooked Path, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Canadian Creepies is recorded on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, under the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. These lands and waters have been cared for since long before Canada existed, and they remain deeply important to Indigenous communities today. As we tell stories about darkness, injustice, and memory, I want to acknowledge the very real histories of colonization, violence, and erasure that Indigenous peoples continue to endure. A land acknowledgement can't undo that harm, but it is a reminder to keep listening, learning, and supporting in truth and reconciliation in meaningful ways. We share these stories not to forget, but to shine light, always with respect for peoples and nations whose land we live on. Canadian Creepies covers true crime, dark history, and disturbing events. Some episodes may include graphic descriptions or sensitive subject matter. We do our best to handle every story with care and respect for those affected. That said, we sometimes use humor and sarcasm as a way to process heavy content, never to disrespect victims, survivors, or their families. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Canadian Creepies. I'm your co-host, Valerie.
And I'm your co-host, Amanda Joy.
And we are here for the 60s Scoop series.
Yeah, our summer series. We're back at it.
Here we are again. It's the summer. We were not gone long, and here we are again. This episode is researched by Christine.
Shout out Christine, Mother
Christine, shout out. Should we just hop right into it?
Yeah, this episode it's some heavy content.
Heavy content, and with the series, we don't like to banter as much. We don't do a creep of the week or a current case.
We want to give our full attention to
in, out, but not like that. Okay. I don't know. We haven't recorded in a bit. Here we are. So here are the references Christine used: The Native Children and the Child Welfare System by Patrick Johnston, 1983. Native Adoption, 1983-03-22. The Indian Act, 1876, and subsequent amendments. Bill C-92, an act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families. The Davin Report, the Bryce Report, the story of Project Gutenberg. Who's this one? I'll just read the whole thing. The story of a national crime being an appeal for justice to the Indians of Canada, the wards of our nation, our allies in the Revolutionary War, our brothers in arms in the Great War, by Peter Henderson Bryce, I believe. And that was 1853, and he lived 1853 to 1932. The final report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Recollections of an Assiniboine Chief by Daniel Kennedy. 60 Scoop Survivors' decades-long journey for justice culminates in historic Pan-Canadian agreement. 60 Scoop Healing Foundation. Raven Sinclair, Dean, Doctor Psychology, Social Work, Research Profile. Raven Sinclair International Indigenous Speakers Bureau, Today's Indigenous Champions. Raven Sinclair Wikipedia, 60 Scoop Network, and the 60 Scoop Ruling. So many wonderful resources here. Thank you, Christine.
She got like a whole ass book from the library.
Yeah.
Like special ordered to do this.
We pushed back the recording and starting of the series so that way Christine could coordinate her research time with the availability of the time of the book, which is only available in archives in Ottawa or something to that effect.
Yeah.
So, snaps for Christine. Very good. I just sounded like my grandma when I said that. Very good. So let's start with The Beautiful Life Corrupted.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Duncan, I'll start.
Yeah. You can tell we haven't recorded in a while.
Yeah. Duncan Campbell Scott, who lived from 1862 to 1947. It's like a crazy to live from the 18s to the 19s. That's
like the mid 19s.
But I guess for us, that's just like the 19s to the 2000s.
I mean, yeah, because we're a double decade.
Yeah.
We're a double decade, a double century.
So it's not that crazy. It's just because it's 1862 that it's like...
And it's so far away for us that we're like, wow.
Yeah. So Duncan Campbell Scott was a prominent Canadian government bureaucrat, poet, and prose writer. He is a deeply controversial figure in Canadian history due to his dual conflicting legacies. For over half a century, from 1879 to 1932, Scott worked for the Department of Indian Affairs, serving as its Deputy Superintendent General from 1913 until his retirement.
Oh boy.
In this role, he became the primary architect of the expansion and strict enforcement of the residential school system. Duncan famously said regarding his objective, "I want to get rid of the Indian problem."
Oh.
I know. "And I do not think, as a matter of fact, that the country ought to continuously protect a class of people who are able to stand on their own feet. Our objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian character in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and there is no Indian question and no Indian department." Let's let that breathe like a fucking... Wow. That's crazy. That's
also,
crazy.
if you want to know more about...
Don't look up to old men. Don't
They're not good role
romanticize
models.
these times.
And if you're just tuning in, if you've just discovered us in recent memory,
Sorry.
check out our last summer series, which was all about the residential schools.
And I should have prefaced with, to talk about the 60 Scoop, we do have to go back into the residential school system as well.
Yeah, touch on it a little bit.
So you're going to hear a little bit about it in this as well.
Yeah.
Before bureaucrats weaponized the law, Indigenous education and family life weren't institutional. They were organic, communal, and deeply interconnected. Indigenous societies across what we now call Canada, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, didn't use brick-and-mortar schools, but their education systems were incredibly sophisticated.
I think they have a better idea than
100%.
we do for school systems.
100%. Children learned by doing. Education wasn't a separate part of the day. It was life itself. A child learned botany, ecology, and wildlife patterns by tracking with fathers and uncles, or harvesting medicines with mothers and grandmothers. History, law, governance, and ethics were passed down through storytelling. Oral traditions were precise historical records. Children were taught how to listen, truly listen, to stories that carried the survival blueprints of their people for thousands of years. In traditional structures, children didn't just belong to two parents. They belonged to an entire community.
Takes a village.
I was going to say that's where the phrase "it takes a village" probably comes from, and we all love to say that on Facebook.
But then not actually
then
support
not do
children,
anything.
take away, school lunches. And
and vote for... Anyway. Elders were the revered keepers of wisdom. See that? I like that. I like elders as keepers of wisdom instead of people who have their thumb on you to keep you down. Because parents were often busy with the intense daily labor of hunting, processing food, and maintaining camp, elders were the primary educators, which makes sense. They provided a patient, loving, and deeply philosophical foundation for young children.
Well, and when you think about it, where did you learn to sew? Where did you learn to bake? Where did you learn certain cooking skills? Probably your grandparents.
That's right.
Like...
If a parent was sick or tracking game far away, extended family stepped in seamlessly. There was no concept of an orphan or a neglected child in a functioning traditional community. Every child was a vital thread in a collective fabric. Language was not just a tool for communication. It was a map of how to interact with the universe. Many Indigenous languages are verb-based rather than noun-based, embedding a worldview where everything, the land, the water, the animals, are alive and moving and in constant relationship with humans. When a child spoke their language, they were actively practicing a worldview based on respect, balance, and reciprocity with the natural world around them, which is just absolutely beautiful.
I think that's how it should be compared to what we're currently doing.
Yeah, well, math. Visual.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to do that when half the people...
the Pythagorean theorem.
Well, and half the people who are out there, refuse to accept that grade 2 science is a real thing.
That's right. That's right. Visualize a home where education doesn't happen at a desk under fluorescent lights, but by a crackling fire.
I love that.
Me too. Imagine a child listening to their grandmother explain the stars, learning the precise vocabulary of the wind, and understanding exactly where they belong in the universe. No fences, no bells, no fear. This was the vibrant reality of Indigenous family life for millennia. Now, imagine a group of men in dark suits sitting in an office in Ottawa. They look at this beautiful, interconnected web of family, language, and survival, and they don't see a culture. They see a problem that needs to be erased. They pick up their pens, amend the law, and turn the simple act of a mother holding her child into a federal crime.
Because what the Indigenous communities have is so foreign to their, British, been around for thousands of years.
Like the monarchy.
Colonizing different...
Just raping and pillaging wherever they can.
The monarchy that has countless amounts of incest to keep everything in the bloodline.
Yeah. Keep it in the family. To trace the true origins of the residential school system, we have to look past the late 1800s Indian Act and go much further back. The system didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was the result of a gradual, chilling shift in how European colonizers viewed Indigenous nations, moving from temporary allies in war and trade to a population problem that needed a permanent, bureaucratic solution. Here's how the machinery was built, piece by piece, long before Duncan Campbell Scott ever took office. The ideological roots began in New France during the early 17th century with French Catholic missionaries, principally the Jesuit and Récollets. They established the very first boarding schools for Indigenous children near Quebec City. The goal was simple: separate children from their parents to break their cultural ties, convert them to Christianity, and make them subjects of the French king. It completely flopped. Indigenous parents flatly refused to give up their children. Duh. And the children who were taken frequently ran away or resisted the rigid structure.
Also.
Again, I say, duh. The French quickly abandoned the boarding school model, realizing they still needed friendly relations with Indigenous nations for the fur trade and military alliances.
And they were a big part of our military alliances. Like, if you look at anything with the War of 1812, which is very heavy in our area, that's all. Like, they were side by side, neck to neck with us on both sides, the American forces and the British and Canadian militias.
Yep. For nearly 2 centuries, the British Crown treated Indigenous nations as sovereign military allies. But after the War of 1812...
I got ahead of myself.
The threat of an American invasion faded and the fur trade declined. Britain no longer needed military allies. They needed land for waves of incoming European settlers. Indigenous people were suddenly reclassified in the eyes of the government. They were no longer strategic partners. They were viewed as physical obstacles to agricultural progress and expansive financial burdens on the colonial purse.
What do you mean agricultural process? Like, I feel like that's like the Indigenous are all about agricultural process.
Imperial policy shifted towards civilizing and assimilating Indigenous people so they would merge into the settler population, surrender their land rights, and cease requiring government resources. Before the federal government took over, early colonial experiments set the stage. The Mohawk Institute in 1828 opened in Brantford, Ontario, by the Anglican Church. This is widely considered the first official residential school. We should have a soundboard with farts. It began as a day school, but quickly shifted into a boarding school, focusing on manual labor, strict discipline, and English immersion. And then there was the Bagot Commission from 1842 or 1844 to 1844, or is it Bagot?
I read it as Bagot, but I could be wrong.
Well, like Bardot.
Yeah.
Bagot.
It's spelled B-A-G-O-T.
Yeah. Sorry.
I like
I'm going to cut you off. Don't talk anymore.
I'm good.
A colonial task force. So the I'm sorry.
That word.
The Bagot Commission from 1842 to 1844, a colonial task force that officially recommended boarding schools as the best way to separate children from the contaminating influence of their parents. It argued that day schools were useless because children went home at night and spoke their own languages.
We did do an episode this past winter on the day school.
Yes, we did. Mm-hmm. Following Confederation in 1867, the newly formed Canadian government under Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald,
which we also did an episode on.
Creep of the Week. He's Creep of the Week. He took control of Indians and lands reserved for Indians, looking at a cost-effective way to clear Western Canada for the railway and settlement. Macdonald sent a journalist and politician named Nicholas Flood Davin to Washington, D.C. The Davin Report. Here we go. Davin's mission was to study how the United States was handling its own Indian problem. And the Americans had pioneered aggressive military-style industrial boarding schools like the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Ugh.
Again, I say,
I hate this so much. I hate this. Okay. Davin returned to Ottawa with the Davin Report of 1879. Davin wrote that day schools were a waste of money. At first you're like, wow, what a good guy Davin was. And then, then he carried on to say that if the government wanted to change a culture, they had to catch the children young. They had to catch the children young. If those aren't words of a predator, I don't know what is. What else did Davin do in Washington? What else did Davin do in Washington to Indigenous children? That's what I want to know.
Let's get into it.
The Indian okay, so he also said the Indian character being what it is, the day school fails. The influence of the wigwam is stronger than the influence of the school. It has been found that the day school did not carry the civilization. Armed with the Davin Report, Sir John A. Macdonald's government struck a fateful dark bargain. The federal government had the legal authority under the Indian Act to create the schools, but they didn't want to pay to build and staff them fully. The major Christian churches, Catholic, Anglican, Presbyterian, and Methodist, already had missionaries on the ground but lacked funding. So they shook hands on a joint venture. And this, my friends, is why we have a lovely saying now called separation of church and state. Separation of church. I just come up with this whole song. The government would provide the per capita funding and the land, and the churches would run the daily operations. By 1883, Macdonald authorized the construction of the first 3 official federal residential schools in Western Canada: Battleford, Qu'Appelle, and High River. The machine was officially turned on, and it would run for more than a century. When it comes to the official authorization of the system, Canada's first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, gave the most damning and frequently cited justification in Canadian history. On May 9th, 1883, Macdonald stood up in the House of Commons to defend his government's new budget allocation, the funding that would officially build the first 3 federal residential schools in Western Canada. His words are chillingly precise because they lay out the exact intent of the system. It was never about education. It was about the systemic destruction of the family unit. Here is exactly what Macdonald argued to Parliament to justify taking children away. When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with its. And notice how he's saying its.
Yeah. Not their.
Yeah, completely dehumanizing them. When the school is on the reserve, the child lives with its parents, who are savages. He is surrounded by savages, and though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training and mode of thought are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write. It has been strongly pressed on myself as the head of the department that the Indian children should be withdrawn as much as possible from the parental influence. And the only way to do that would be to put them in central training industrial schools where they will acquire the habits and modes of thought of white men. Blech. In his eyes, a child learning to read and write while still going home to a loving family at night was a failure. Why? Because they stayed Indigenous. The enemy wasn't ignorance, it was parental influence. To dismantle a culture, you had to physically sever the transmission of a culture from parent to child. When MacDonald says acquire the habits and modes of thought of white men, he is describing the absolute erasure of identity. And while building these schools, MacDonald's administration was actively withholding food rations from Plains First Nations to force them onto reserves and clear land for the Canadian Pacific Railway. In 1882, MacDonald openly admitted to Parliament, "I have reason to believe that the agents as a whole are doing all they can by refusing food until the Indians are on the verge of starvation to reduce the expense." The blueprint was total. On one hand, the state intentionally starved the parents on the plains to break their physical resistance. On the other hand, they built industrial schools to take their children and break their cultural future. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged assault handled entirely through bureaucratic paperwork and parliamentary debates. And nobody would have had to actually, like the people signing the laws didn't even witness this stuff happening.
No. They were just like, sounds good to me.
Yeah, no problem.
Signing off. Fuck. So prior to 1894, the Canadian government relied heavily on religious missionaries to convince Indigenous parents to enroll their children in industrial and boarding schools. Gross.
Yeah.
When enrollment lagged, the government decided to use the full force of the law, passed under the administration of Prime Minister John S. Thompson. The 1894 amendment to the Indian Act gave the governor and council the authority to make the regulations that would legally compel children to attend these schools.
Oh.
It specifically targeted children aged 7 to 16 who were deemed by officials to not be receiving the proper education at home. It authorized the creation of the school truant officers, often local Indian agents, farm instructors, or Northwest Mounted Police officers, who were legally empowered to enter the homes and physically remove children. Come on.
I hate that. You can just come up in your home and take your child.
Yeah,
that's nightmare fuel. It's no bueno.
This laid the groundwork, and it still allowed for some parental pushback based on medical exemptions, distance, or lack of school capacities, which frustrated bureaucrats who wanted total control. By 1920, Duncan Campbell Scott,
Back to him,
he began running the Department of the Indian Affairs for 7 years.
No need.
Oh, he already had been running it for 7 years.
Yeah.
He was furious that some Indigenous families were still finding legal loopholes to keep their children at home, protect their language, and shield them from the rampant disease inside of the schools.
He was a wretched man.
Scott personally drafted and pushed through the 1920 amendment to close every single loophole. This amendment stripped away the remaining illusion of parental choice. Of parental choice. This made the attendance strictly compulsory for every single healthy Indigenous child between the ages of 7 and 15. The state, not the parent, held absolute custody over the child's whereabouts from September to June. If a parent refused to hand over their child or hid them when Indian agents arrived, they were automatically breaking the federal law. The agents were granted judicial power of justice of peace, so they could summarily sentence a non-compliant parent to fines that were heavy financial penalties that many families deliberately keeping impoverished by passing laws and economic restrictions that they could not pay. It also was imprisonment, jail time, and provincial lockups if the fines could not be paid or if the parent repeatedly refused to comply. This amendment meant that a mother or a father could be sent to prison simply for wanting to raise their child in their own home. In 1894, the state built the cage. In 1920, Duncan Campbell Scott locked the door and criminalized anyone who tried to open it. The reaction to the 1920 Mandatory Attendance Amendment wasn't passive compliance. This was an era of desperate, active resistance by Indigenous parents and communities fighting a state apparatus that had legally normalized the abduction of their children. And that's what it was. It was abduction.
Legal abduction.
When Duncan Campbell Scott's Iron Fist law rolled out, communities deployed multiple tactics to protect their children from Indian agents and the Northwest Mounted Police. Communities established sophisticated warning systems. If an Indian agent's vehicle or an NWMP officer was spotted on the approaching roads, word spread instantly. Parents would pack up their children and flee deeply into the bush, living off the land and hiding hunting camps for weeks or months until the agents gave up and left.
Yeah, same.
I would too.
Like exactly what I would do.
Yeah. Intertribal political organizations like the Allied Indian Tribes formed aggressively in the 1920s to fight the Indian Act restrictions. They attempted to take land title and human rights cases all the way to the Privy Council in London. The government was so terrified of this legal resistance that in 1927, they amended the Indian Act again, making it entirely illegal for Indigenous persons to hire a lawyer or raise money to advance legal cases.
Oh, wow. It's horrible.
I hate this so much.
It's awful. If you're looking to learn more from Indigenous voices, I'd love to recommend 3 incredible podcasts. All My Relations, hosted by Matika Wilbur and Tamara Slane, explores Indigenous relationships to land, community, culture, and one another through thoughtful conversations that are honest, funny, and deeply moving. One Dish, One Mic, created by Carl Dockstader of the Oneida Nation and Sean Vanderklis, a member of Curve Lake First Nation, shines a light on Indigenous stories, issues, and community conversations with insight and heart. And Relentless Indigenous Woman, hosted by Dr. Candice Manitopes of Moose Cree First Nation, brings powerful discussions on Indigenous leadership, sovereignty, resilience, and reclaiming space. If you enjoy Canadian Creepies and want to deepen your understanding of Indigenous perspectives, these are a fantastic place to start. Let's take a moment during this break to talk about something that matters, something that doesn't get to be background noise. The Anishinaabe-Moan word, Nikinagana, means we are all related, and we are. But relationship isn't just about words, it's about responsibility. Canadian author Naomi Klein once said, "It is not enough to say that we live on Indigenous land. We have to act as if we do." And one way to do that is by supporting Pay Your Rent, a grassroots mutual aid initiative that offers direct material support to Indigenous organizers across this land. It's not charity, it's rent. For those of us who aren't Indigenous to this place, it's a way to show up differently, to redistribute some of what's been taken. The Pay Your Rent Fund started as a one-time request for help in 2018 and grew into a nonprofit called Nikinagana. Your monthly or one-time donation can help provide food, hygiene supplies, housing support, and resources for Indigenous-led resistance and community care. So if you've ever said, "We're all related," ask yourself, are you being a good relative? Visit payyourrent.ca and find out more about how you can be part of something better. Now, back to this case.
Knowing the state would jail them for keeping children completely uneducated by Western standards, some communities attempted to run hidden, unauthorized day schools on their own terms to prove their children were learning, trying to exploit any sliver of the legal defense. This wasn't happening at a distant dictatorship. This was happening in Ontario, in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, just right down the highway from where you may be sitting right now. The concept of treating Indigenous children as a blank slate was the foundational psychology of the residential school system. In their eyes, in the state of the church, and in this blah, 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 let me try that again. In the eyes of the state and the church, an Indigenous child's mind wasn't a clean slate naturally. It was a slate crowned by erroneous traditions, languages, and family structure.
Sorry, it was a slate crowded with erroneous traditions.
Thank you.
Crowned and crowded, just very different.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm writing too fast.
Yeah, just slow down. We're not in a rush.
Yeah, my mind doesn't work that way. Before they could write a new Eurocentric, thank you.
You're welcome.
Identity onto the child, they needed to aggressively scrub the old one clean. I'm so annoyed.
It's really annoying.
This scrubbing process was intentional, immediate, and a violent psychological destruction that began the exact minute the child walked through the doors. The first 24 hours at a residential school were designed to completely shock the child's system and break their sense of individuality.
Oh, we love that.
Christine wants to say that this has real concentration camp vibes.
Totally.
And it does.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
Long hair holds deep spiritual, cultural, and family significance in almost all Indigenous cultures, often tied to strength, identity, and mourning. I do know that they'll often cut their hair when there's a very big loss. Upon arrival, children were forced into chairs where their hair was brutally shorn off,
like with sheep shears.
Yeah, or shaved to the scalp with sheep shears.
Well, I don't know. That's just like shorting.
You know what? I bet that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, they probably used
with sheep shears. Yeah. Survivors describe this as a moment that they felt stripped of their dignity and their humanity. Children were stripped naked and scrubbed down with harsh abrasive soaps, in many cases doused in toxic chemicals like kerosene and DDT powder, under the guise of delousing.
Ugh. And delousing is like getting bugs off you.
Yeah. Like lice or
yeah.
scabies, stuff like that.
Yeah.
The ritual sent a clear subconscious message. You are inherently dirty, and we must clean you. Traditional names given by families or elders were immediately banned. Children were assigned English or French names, and more chillingly, they were frequently assigned a number. This is giving concentration camp vibes.
That's exactly what they did at the concentration camps.
They wore this number on their clothes, and this was how they would call children into the cafeteria, the classroom, and the register. A child became number 42 or number 115. Language is how the child structure their thoughts and understanding their world, their connection to the world. By severing language, the system severed the child's ability to communicate with its own ancestors.
With their own ancestors. You said it's.
It's my bad. I'm
sorry.
I'm sorry. That is
sorry.
Speaking a traditional language, even a single word whispered to a sibling in the dark of the dormitory was met with severe, immediate physical violence.
I'm just kidding. You didn't say anything wrong.
No, I'm subconsciously thinking about it.
I'm just kidding. Sorry, I'm not trying to trip you up.
I'm all tripped up.
Don't be.
Survivors recall having their tongues pricked with needles.
Ugh. I don't even know how to respond to any of this. We're just sharing the information. Being forced to eat bars of lye soap until they vomited, or being beaten with leather straps for accidentally slipping back into their mother tongue. These are children. Literal children.
Over years of confinement, children naturally began to lose their native fluency. The psychological horror peaked when they were finally allowed to return home for short visits. Because, they had them till like June and from September through June, and then they could go home.
Mm-hmm.
And I just lost my place. Only to find out that they could no longer speak to their own mother and grandmothers. They were marooned between two worlds, unable to speak the language of their family, but never truly accepted into the white settler society. To prevent the influence of the wigwam.
Ugh. Nicholas Davin sucks. He's creep of the week.
Yep. As Nicholas Flood Davin put it, the schools had to completely destroy the concept of the family unit. Aren't we all about family unit right now?
Now we are. Yeah, now we are.
Fuck. Schools were strictly split down the middle into boys and girls wings. Brothers and sisters who entered the school together were entirely forbidden from speaking to, looking at, or acknowledging one another. If a brother tried to hug his crying little sister in the hallway, they were both severely punished for commingling. Parents frequently wrote letters to their children, and the children tried to write home. School staff routinely intercepted, read, and destroyed these letters. The state intentionally led parents to believe that their children had forgotten them, while convincing the children that their own parents had abandoned them.
Wow.
By raising children in cold, loveless institutional settings governed by bells, routines, and fear, the system successfully prevented them from ever witnessing or experiencing healthy parental affection. When survivors grew up and had children of their own, many found themselves completely unequipped to express love or handle family dynamics, passing the institutional trauma down through generations. When we think of historical atrocities, we often focus on the physical violence. But what happened inside these schools was a systemic assault on the human psyche. They didn't just want the children's bodies for labors. They wanted to colonize their minds. Think about the cold, calculated cruelty of it. You cut their hair. You wash them with chemicals. You take away their names that their mothers gave them and give them a number. And then you make their very mother-loving... And then you make their very mother tongue a punishable offense. If they speak the language of their birth, you put needles in their tongues and force soap down their throat. This wasn't education, which is why they took the kids from the parents to begin with, under the guise that you're not educating them properly.
Yeah.
This was a psychological meat grinder designed to ensure that when a child did finally walk out of those gates, they no longer could speak their language to their own mother. They eradicated the child's world. They left them in a void, and they called it civilizing them.
It wasn't civilizing.
No, nothing about that was civilized.
It's called colonization.
And remember, these schools existed until the year 2000.
Or 1997 or something.
No, I remember it was 2000 because I was like, holy fuck, I entered high school that year.
Yeah. That's
crazy. I think in 97 was when they started to be like, let's maybe not.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about some survivor stories. The physical act of taking the children plays out like a psychological horror film. Here are documented accounts from survivors that illustrate the brutal mechanics of how the system functioned. Daniel Kennedy, who became Assiniboine chief, I remembered, recalled the terrifyingly literal nature of state abduction in his memoir, Recollections of an Assiniboine Chief. He was 12 years old when the authorities arrived at his community. He wrote about being hunted down like livestock by the government agents. He was lassoed and roped by men on horseback.
Are you kidding me? We're not cow tipping here.
Yeah. Bound and thrown into a wagon against his will to be taken to the school. The sheer physical violence used on a child completely underscores that this was an aggressive, state-sanctioned kidnapping. His traditional name was Ohan Kugane, which means pathmaker, a name honoring a journey his grandfather led through the prairie blizzard. 6 months after his enrollment, he discovered an English name had been assigned to him. The school interpreter later informed him that when he gave his traditional name at the enrollment, the principal remarked that there were no letters in the alphabet to spell this little heathen's name, and no civilized tongue could pronounce it.
We just did.
Yeah, we just did. Immediately after his hair was shorn close to the scalp, Kennedy wondered in silence if his mother had died, as short hair was associated with mourning in his culture.
Oh.
Looking into the mirror, he recalled thinking, a Halloween pumpkin stared back at me, which solidified his resistance to the institution. Rejecting the environment, Kennedy ran away from the school immediately after his haircut, but was captured and brought back. He made 2 additional escape attempts, but faced the same outcome. Shirley Williams was born and raised in Wicmacong on Manitoulin Island and was a member of the Bird Clan of the Ojibwe and Odawa First Nations. She was taken to St. Joseph's boarding school in Spanish, Ontario. Her testimony focuses heavily on the immediate psychological fracturing that occurred the moment a child crossed the threshold. She recalled arriving at the school, a stark, ugly, gray brick building looming in the rain. She watched the heavy iron gates swing shut behind her. She described the exact second, not just as a physical imprisonment, but an emotional one, stating that her heart locked the moment that gate clicked into place. Immediately after, her name was stripped away. Shirley Pheasant became a number and a Western name, Shirley Williams. Despite the system's attempt to erase her culture, Williams survived the experience and went on to become a foundational professor of Indigenous studies and a traditional Anishinaabe elder, dedicating her life to preserving and teaching the Anishinaabemowin language. Flora Merrick's story exposes the absolute lack of human empathy within the school administration. When her mother died, Flora desperately begged the school principals to let her go home and attend the funeral and say goodbye, and the school flatly refused. Determined to be with her family in their deepest grief, Flora ran away from the school. She was hunted down, captured, and brought back. As punishment for trying to get to her mother's funeral, she was beaten until she was black and blue, and then locked alone in a pitch-black room for 2 straight weeks. Decades later, during the government's alternative dispute resolution process, or the ADR process, an adjudicator awarded her a small compensation of $1,500 for the incident, noting the sheer arbitrariness and trauma of the event. However, the Canadian government fought the ruling on the appeal, arguing that the severe strapping was within the acceptable standards of physical punishment for schools at the time, forcing Merrick to take her claim to court to fight for acknowledgement of the abuse.
That's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
For an Indigenous child, their language was their literal lifeline to home. Stripping it away required a campaign of physical terror. George Manuel of the Suquamish Nation, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, who later became the foundational Indigenous political leader, was sent to Kamloops Indian Residential School. He recalled that speaking Semquemhem-istim was treated by the staff as an act of absolute defiance. If a child was caught speaking their Indigenous language, the punishment was immediately. Their mouth was violently scrubbed out with bars of harsh, caustic lye soap. Lye soap is a highly alkaline. Harshly. It is harsh.
Yeah, it is harsh too.
It burns the mucous membranes of the mouth, causing swelling, blistering, and chemical vomiting. That's horrific.
Yeah.
Because if it's chemical vomiting, it's destroying the back of your teeth and it's destroying your esophagus as well, which causes all sorts of health problems down the line. Mm-hmm. Manuel noted that the message was unmissable. The very words of your mother are a poison inside you that we must chemically burn out.
Oof.
That's heavy. Mm-hmm. Bevel Breland recalled... Belvy?
Yeah, sorry.
Recalled the psychological warfare used to turn children against their own voices. In her school, the nuns established a spy system.
I hate that.
They would give a small token to a student, and if that student heard another child speak a word in their native language, they passed the token to them. Whoever held the token at the end of the day received a severe public beating with a leather strap. It would force children to police each other, destroying the baseline for communal trust. And I feel like it's manipulative, because if that child is the one who has the token at the end of the day, they're going to be like, well, you didn't do your job. You're lying about not hearing anybody, and beat that child. So you would automatically want to pass it off to somebody else, even if you really didn't hear anybody say anything.
Yeah, you're just passing around whoopings.
That would break a lot of trust.
You wouldn't trust anybody ever again.
And then you have other kids that are like, I'm not taking that from you. Fuck, I know what that means.
Yeah, no, no.
Yeah, that's just a breeding ground for horrific things. Linda Ross was sent to Lydia Ross. I am all over the place today. You can tell we haven't recorded in a while. Lydia Ross was sent to the Cross Lake School in Manitoba. Her brother was sent to the same institution. Because the school was strictly segregated by gender, they were completely forbidden from speaking to, looking at, or acknowledging each other. She recalled seeing her brother across the crowded cafeteria. He was crying, visibly distressed and lonely. Naturally, she took a step towards him to comfort him. A supervisor immediately grabbed her, dragged her away. For the simple crime of trying to look at her brother to ensure he was safe, she was publicly and severely punished. Siblings learned to pass each other in the hallways like ghosts, staring straight ahead, suppressing every natural human instinct to protect their own blood. Archie Hyacinth, a Stamunese First Nations, was taken to the Cooper Island Residential School in British Columbia, often nicknamed Alcatraz by survivors due to the isolated island location. That's crazy.
Yeah.
He described the shearing of his hair at his first true taste of terror. In his culture, hair was only cut during times of deep, intense existential mourning. Archie recalled sitting in the chair while his long braids hit the floor. Oh. He didn't understand English yet. That's even worse.
Yeah. He would have no idea why that's happening.
Yeah, no idea. Like, what's going on? Can't understand what's happening to him next. That would be terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody would look him in the eye. That's even worse.
Yeah.
That tells you they know they're doing something that they shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
He explicitly stated that as the clippers moved over his scalp, he was entirely convinced that his mother and father had died, and that the school was forcing him into mourning. The staff laughed at his tears, completely blind to the profound spiritual devastation that they were inflicting on a 6-year-old boy. The ultimate step in creating a blank slate was stripping a child of their legal identity. When a child arrived, their traditional names were entered into a ledger, crossed out with a single red line, and replaced. Rim Lee, Chippewanyan and Dene, recalled that from the very moment he entered the school, his name ceased to exist. He became number 71. The numbers were stamped into their clothes, their shoes, and their bed. When the roll call was read, their names were not spoken. If 71 didn't stand up instantly, the punishment was to be a strike across the face. Survivors have noticed that decades later, when they hear certain numbers called out in grocery stores or public spaces, their body still physically tense into a conditioned fear response. I guess it would.
Yeah.
They didn't want to educate these children. They wanted to empty them out. They wanted to leave a hollow shell so that the Canadian slate could fill it with something else.
The Canadian state.
Slate, state, it's all the same.
Great job.
I tried.
This has been this episode, part 1. We'll be back next week for part 2.
That we will. You said it's 4 parts this time?
4 parts.
I dig it.
Yeah.
I think last time was 6, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Now we're doing 4.
Woohoo!
Great research, Christine.
Thank you, Mother.
Thank you, Mother.
Thank you, Mother.
Follow us everywhere. I guess I should say that. Canadian Creepies podcast at gmail.com. You can follow Canadian Creepies on Instagram. You can follow Radio Valerie on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can also send us your Creep of the Week and current case suggestions. Speakpipe.com/Canadian Creepies. I don't have to use your voice, but if you want me to, let me know. Also, we have a website, CanadianCreepies.com. All right.
Woohoo!
It's very bare bones right now, but it will get better as time goes on.
We just need the time too. There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
So, you can follow me at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Yeah.
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 We're going to go make some social media content now.
Woohoo! Check us out.
Bye. Don't let the bed creeps bite.
Creep you later.